At the end of the Middle Ages, democracies became mightier than tyrannies. Western civilization was expanding its influence in the East, getting closer and closer to the Caucasus. The second half of the 18th century brought the Ingush hope for the restoration of the democratic country.
The nomads who fought the Ingush on the plains of North Caucasus suddenly lost their historic ally Peter and Russia. Europeanized and militarily upgraded, Russia began its own expansion into the region. The balance of power had changed forever.
The Ingush took up arms to regain control of the plains. They achieved huge success by taking the plains from Adon in the west to the Aktash River in the east. In the early 19th century, only memories remained of the Nagai horde. Two waves of colonization, the Ingush from the south and the Russian from the north, met on the river Terek.
Zorchi, Sholchi, Angushti, Akhi Yurti Yash, Arah, Metik Jadavi, Holga Ariah, Sach Metik Hanivi, Wamar Ardan, is Hanteher Bashirish Gadis, Holga Akal Babu Bom Yuch, Shericha, and Sherichi, Nan Nasri, always Nasri. Znan Nasri, oh, Quali Hadwaj, they can we come there, they met his. The warriors Hani, to Hatsnasri, Ingushetia is that after Khalatat and Khalatat. Nacht Nasr, Nacht, Washpon, Waman Hayash, Kosag, and they come in mythology of those, is metic warriors. Ayerge at the Mumbai gets a gift back by Chelsea, Humki, Ele Arisha, Tatalets, and his met Nora, Humki, Tadalets, I should arm, Ustig Dalio could there, Arabian is left to Halita. All Resi, Rasky, when they make Habakla, Gala Arabian is the egg job on Nikba, was a teacher of Hashbosh. The Stirk Zorchi is metic Sigala that they warriors, Nick Warby Gala that they. مش مات يجي اجل بكايا مات يجيش لا قصدي مش تحليتها جو جورتج يعني في راس حبه لا جورتج يعني هذا جورج اللي سجل لا دادو لا تحدو قش خذ بارغت بوغا باخ مات دوك هو غاواج لا تايتي كانت اها كده يعني ناتش كان سقان الكاش بيولوجي غاواج مش تحمل ليو ذات في قسجي حمديش خنداتي.
Vazha-Pshavela was born towards the end of the Caucasian War. His generation witnessed the staggering consequences of the military defeat of the Ingush, but it seems he was the only one who saw the catastrophe of the Ingush civilization which you are just about to discover.
Aluda and Jakolo are seen as morally ahead of their societies, although each for a different reason. Aluda is a Kefso with a new vision who encouraged others to see and understand his new worldview. Jakola, an old-fashioned Ingush, is shocked by the degradation he sees in the worldview of his contemporaries. His intention is to bring the society back to Ingush cultural values. Probably, Vazha-Pshavela encrypted the message about degradation which occurred in Ingush society as a result of the Caucasian War. Russian and Western historians share the common understanding of the Caucasian War as the Muslim resistance to the Tsar led by Imam Shamil. However, they are unable to answer critical questions like why the Caucasian War suddenly began, why the Russians did not support the Ingush in their war against Imam Shamil, why the strategy of Yermolov, the Russian commander-in-chief, targeted the only Christian Ingush state in the North Caucasus. Modern thinking has solved these issues by refusal to recognize English identity. In their minds, there is no such nation, no ancient Christian democracy, no contradictions. There were savage pagan tribes forgotten by God in the mountains, they say. However, an objective look at English culture allows us to make another reconstruction of the Caucasian War. Having been the Russian commander-in-chief, nowadays he is remembered as a white supremacist Christian civilizer, Alexei Yermolov appealed to the succession of the power of the Mongols, claimed to be a descendant of Genghis Khan and a Muslim.
The conquest of the North Caucasus did not represent any serious military cost for Russia. The only costs the Russians really cared about were those in their European relations. 200 years ago, they were totally and utterly associated with Christianity and the democratic Ingushetia.
In the early 19th century, Great Britain began the struggle against slavery around the world. Yermolov proposed to the Tsar to cover up the colonization of the Caucasus by abolitionism. The slave trade flourished in the North Caucasus, but it was exclusively by the Muslims. Upon this slaver background, the existence of Christian democratic Ingushetia appeared to demonstrate an obvious contradiction regarding the fake cover-up of Russian colonization. This caused the disaster of the Ingush. The implementation of the Yermolov strategy caused the stubborn resistance of the Ingush and the beginning of the Caucasian War. But even after Yermolov's resignation, the Tsar did not find the courage to recognize crimes against his own religion, and so the strategy was encouraged. Later, the new anti-heroes Imam Shamil and the Russian general Musa Kundukhov continued Yermolov's war to destroy Ingushetia. After 36 years of war, the resistance of Ingushetia gave the West a chance to change the course of history. The Crimean War of 1853 put Russia in a difficult situation. The British Prime Minister Lord Palmerston was so impressed with the stoic struggle of the mountaineers that he declared the creation of the independent North Caucasian state ideal as the outcome of the war. The modern map of the Caucasus had been drawn up by the Russians during colonization, but then, in the mid-19th century, the fate of the Caucasus had yet to be solved. The British vision for the region was historically sound and different from that of Russia. The West was so close to debunking false Russian abolitionism. Meanwhile, the Russians had regained old allies in the region, Muslim slaver tribes that surrounded Ingushetia. The Russians offered them the lands of the ancient Ingush country and the cherished historical heritage of that civilized autochthonous nation. Relying on these slavers, the Russians besieged Ingushetia. At this point, Russia had decided what the world should know about the conflict in the region, and the picture they drew up was fighting against Muslim slavery. They portrayed the slaver Imam Shamil as their enemy. The British believed the false romantic tales of the Imam and sought ways to cooperate with him. Unexpectedly for them, Shamil became passive during the Crimean War. The only action he took was in the raid of Alazan in Georgia, with the capture of 100 Georgians for the slave trade. This clearly demonstrated the Russians' picture of the conflict. Europe's sympathies for the mountaineers were replaced with contempt and disgust.
The Russians were defeated in the Crimean War, but due to the villainous replacement of the Ingush Christian resistance by the Muslim movement of Imam Shamil, the Caucasian issue was resolved in Russia's favor. Deceived by the slavish Shamil and forgotten by the world, the Ingush people had been left alone in the face of barbarians. They were alone once again, just like they were hundreds of times throughout their long, long history. But this time, there was no chance of success, not a single chance. Directly behind them was the watershed of the Caucasus, the highest mountains in Europe, and ahead of them, fortified lines of Russians, one of the strongest army in the world, who set the Shamil bands onto the Ingush, just like the first Christians in the face of wild predators in the Roman arenas. The Ingush were about to fight their last battles in the name of Jesus Christ.
During the Caucasian War, a part of the Ingush was cruelly subordinated and forcibly Islamized by Imam Shamil. Eventually, their previous sense of identity was absorbed by a new nation built by the Russians on the Shamil heritage. The central part of the country, now modern Ingushetia, won the war against the Imam, yet also converted to Islam after the war. However, they still retained the culture of their ancestors. The change of religion and its first ever colonization were to crush a colossal stratum of ancient culture. Ancient sacred relics had become to mean nothing. People desperately tried to overcome its painful consequences.
Даже мусульманившееся местное население пыталось, сохраняя память об этом памятнике, все-таки внести его в свою жизнь. Каким образом? Дело в том, что именно в этот период, мне кажется, это 19 век, может быть, начало 20-го, возникает такая фольклорная основа. Фольклорная основа предания, которое гласит, что храм Тхаба-Ярды построен там, где пророк Мухаммед, саллаллаху, зарыл Коран, а Коран был спущен с небес на золотых цепях.
Like other European nations, the Ingush took centuries to combine Christianity with individualism. New Abrahamic religion brought back the same old problem. But under pressure, all they had was self-deception, to naively attribute the values of their culture to their new religion. Looking at the cathedral in Tbilisi, built in tribute to the victory of Christianity in the Caucasian War, Vazha-Pshavela said, "I would give the only eye in my head to not see this temple." The poet did not share the Russian view on the Caucasian War. He also reflected the clash of the Ingush with new religion. To protect his guests via dowry, Jacola at first appeals to religion, even though hospitality is a strong cultural value. When self-deception reveals its futility, Jacola switched for a more civilized outlook. He insists on the "my house is my castle" principle. That likely demonstrates Vazha-Pshavela's appeal to the Ingush to maintain social relationships on the basis of their culture, not religion. But on the last 2 centuries, the Ingush have been balancing on the verge of total oblivion. They could listen to no one.